Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about some logistics that have to do with Palantir. I have a big show I'm working on with Peter Thiel and all of that, but there's some things that we need to talk about first about Palantir. Palantir is a big buzzword now, right? Along with AI. Everybody's talking about, oh, AI, it's going to get your job. No, they're getting rid of people's jobs because they're psychopaths and they want to see people in pain. That's why no one in this country is job secure at this stage of the game. It has nothing to do with AI because there's just all this talk about AI, all these things they're going to be doing. Keep in mind, Amazon, remember when they had that fake checkout that they got busted for recently, where they claimed that people were able to just walk in the store, grab merchandise, and it was being checked out because of AI? Well, that was all being done by, what was it, people in India or somewhere were logged on. There had 1,000 workers. So they've been doing AI fakes already. AI is now the big hype word. And another big hype word I've noticed too, all this no kings. Oh, we're going to have a march against kings. We didn't elect a king. Well, I think we're either with a nation of people that are too stupid to realize we do not have a democracy in the first place. And all of this actually feeds into Silicon Valley. So I'm trying not to be able, I'm not able to do long, lengthy shows. So I'm going to be doing this segment to give you the background on why this AI stuff is complete garbage. Because in order for AI to be functional the way they're talking about it, we're talking 20 to 30 years down the road. Well, just takes a little bit of logic, right? AI used a lot of electricity, used a lot of power. There's a lot of hype around it, all this money spilling going. So let me give you some background today. But just in a recap, I found another article that I liked a lot that speaks very clearly about this issue that the United States is not a democracy. And that's a lot of what this AI garbage is about. They're going to take away our democracy. They're going to be having a dome over our heads, just like the Matrix. Pretty soon, they'll be able to recognize us from the sky. There's going to be a big dome. Look, he just approved a budget for it. Yeah, it is actually more like something out of central casting, if you ask me. But first, let me read a portion of this article. We're talking about the war between the Revolutionary War, right? Between the United States and the ruler, the king in England, okay? Let's put a little logic to this thing. This treaty was signed in 1783. The war was over in 1781. If the United States defeated England, how is the king granting rights to America when we were now his equal in status? We supposedly defeated him in the Revolutionary War. So why would these supposed patriot Americans sign such a treaty when they knew that this would void any sovereignty gained by the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War? Well, if we had won the Revolutionary War, the king granting us our land would not be necessary. It would have been ours by his loss of the Revolutionary War. To not dictate the terms of a peace treaty in a position of strength after winning a war means the war was never won. Think of other wars we have won, such as when we defeated Japan. Did MacArthur allow Japan to dictate him the terms to surrender? No way. All these men did is gain status and privilege granted by the king and ensure the subjection of future unaware generations, sorry. Worst of all, they sold out those that gave their lives and property for the chance to be free. When Cornwallis surrendered to Washington, he surrendered the battle, not the war. Read the article of capitulation signed by Cornwallis at Yorktown, footnote 3. Jonathan Williams recorded in his book Legions of Satan, 1781, that Cornwallis revealed to Washington during his surrender that a holy war will now begin on America. And when it is ended, America will be supposedly the citadel of freedom, but her millions will unknowingly be loyal subjects to the crown. In less than 200 years, the whole nation will be working for divine world government. That government that they believe to be divine will be the British Empire. All the treaty did was remove the name United States as a liability and obligation of the king. He no longer had to ship material and money to support his subjects and colonies. At the same time, he retained financial subjection through debt owed after the treaty, which is still being created today, millions of dollars a day. And his heirs and successors are still reaping the benefit of the king's original venture. If you will read the following quote from Title 26, you will see just one situation where the king is still collecting a tax from those that receive a benefit from him on property, which is purchased with the money the king supplies, at almost the same percentage. So, and I have the whole article down below for you to take a look at. This is not a democracy, and that is a lot of what they're yelling about. What's happening now is Silicon Valley and Peter Thiel are becoming the enemy because Peter Thiel and Palantir have contracts with ICE and local government. See where this is going? And out of central casting, they have their own set of characters like Peter Thiel, who I'll be getting much more into down the road here. They have a man named Curtis Yarvin. He's the intellectual behind the presidency and the word red pill. You heard that word yet, red pill in the Matrix and stuff? Yeah, well, that came from a guy named Curtis Yarvin, who is one of them, okay? A total operation, okay? There's another character named Karp, who supposedly is the president of Palantir, a total CIA cutout looking person, right? Goes around, talks like a little gangster. And they keep talking about the end of democracy and this idea about they're going to give us real IDs. They're going to track all of us. And pretty soon they're going to have a dome over our heads tracking our every move. Well, I'd like to throw a little bit of cold water on this fun fight because what are the big issues here? Well, I sat down and did what we used to do in the old days. I came up with a business proposal and I looked at Palantir to figure out if Palantir is telling the truth about all of these plans they have for us for this dome over our heads and to collect all of our data and all of this stuff, well, then Palantir, they must have some dateline when this is all going to take effect, right? What if I told you that it is not possible, I mean, not even close to possible, that this happens within the next 20 years, okay? And I'll be showing you all of the things that I found out about this because what are the two big things these data centers need? Electricity and water. Well, we have an old rocky grid, so how are they going to get the electricity and where's the water going to come from? Big ideas. Big ideas take big plots, right? And this has not really been thought through very well. So everybody is now arguing over AI. I did a show about this quite a long time ago, but I'd like to remind you that AI, we're in the first step of it now with this chat GPT step, okay? Think of the current AI as like a big search engine. But what's happening now, which is interesting, is the electricity, even to run these search engines, all this free chat GPT is costing them money because of all the electricity that it uses. So that's why when you go to use like chat GPT or something, it will cut you off at a certain point and try to get you to either sign up with a plan or come back later. The main reason is, well, they're trying to sell you the plan, obviously, but the main reason is this is costing them a lot of money. I wouldn't want anybody to be having fun on ChatGPT to start costing them more money now, would we? So, anyhow, so back to the subject besides, well, if ChatGPT started getting a lot of electricity expenses, that would be just a shame. That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, so why is social media all yelling about Palantir? Well, to create fear. Do they really believe it or are they agents? Lots of them are taking Thiel money. Thiel was the original financer in Rumble, you know, the free space. And the majority of the people yelling about Peter Thiel are over there on Rumble, and they have contracts. People like, oh, Russell Brand, Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald. Rumble made a lot of deals with content creators. So they have, I don't know what the exact deals are, but they get paid money for uploading to Rumble first, and then they upload to YouTube later. It's all just another cash grab, right? But it was really to push Rumble as a platform because they've done a pretty dismal job of BitChute and those other places. So I guess to lure people in, they said that Rumble is this, free speech thing. Well, keep in mind, Peter Thiel was the original funder of Rumble. Okay, so his money is into Rumble. Just like I told you before, Whitney Webb started off with a place called, what was it called over there in Mint Press. Well, Mint Press is actually owned by one of John Kerry's groups that's run out of the UK. That's the Chatham Group. Yeah, they all have their fingers in all these pies to control what we're seeing and hearing, right? So are they doing it for Teal money? Are they doing it for the clicks and the money? I don't know. We've got Candace Owen in the picture and her CIA agent, a guy named Ian Carroll in there on the Palantir thing. They're all talking about it. But Whitney Webb, WW, seems to lead the pack. So, um, so what's going on now is Palantir is winning high-profile government contracts, like for the NHS, the UK, the US military, border control, pandemic surveillance. So this naturally is making people wanting to wonder about their role in surveillance, right? And predictive policing. Predictive policing just means they're going around and trying to figure out what crimes we might commit in the future, just like what kind of diseases we might get in the future, and they need the vaccines, right? So as AI booms, people are primed to fear big data, spy tech companies, and Palantir is an easy villain right now, is how I'm seeing it, okay? So because we've got all these wars going on, domestic unrest, elections, and the Silicon Valley people are really rearing their ugly heads. I worked in Silicon Valley for years, and after I left there, for all these years, it wasn't very popular to talk about Silicon Valley. But after I stopped working in Silicon Valley, the reason I stopped was because that was when I discovered that Silicon Valley was run by psychopaths, and that was why I stopped and left after my lawsuit against Intel. So I have been aware of this for a long, long time, but it's good to see that people are finally catching on, right? So there's a lot of power when you mention Silicon Valley because it comes with words like, oh, Stanford and all these big names and stuff, right? So there's a lot wrapped into all this, like why are these people all talking about it? But for example, Whitney Webb, she's been consistent in sounding the alarm on intelligence industry ties, and that's why she's covered a lot about Palantir. Well, what are Whitney Webb and all of them leaving off? Well, I would say a lot. So, influencers know what sells. Even if they have legitimate concerns, they amplify the most extreme angle because really that's what drives the attention. Just like they put their crazy looking faces in thumbnails showing a shock look. Oh, look what I found out. So anyway, people who take Peter Thiel money for Rumble deals but scream about Palantir may be playing both sides just to generate outrage, build followers, and so drive them to the platform and to talk about, well, I criticize my backers. Well, that's because, and I heard this in action the other day, Jimmy Dore, who is also over on Rumble with a contract, on his YouTube show, I was standing around and he said he was talking about Palantir. So I zoomed in there for a second. In his opening clip, he said, well, people always criticize me for not criticizing Palantir. And here I am talking about them again. Well, he's hiding the fact that he's got a big Palantir contract, okay? So, yeah, so they all want to kind of say, like, I'm not hiding the information. And they're also, it's all about omission, right? So I think they're playing both sides to generate outrage. And the best way I can describe it is outrage that burns energy but changes nothing. Okay, you heard me right. Outrage that burns energy but changes nothing. And that is really what defines social media, right? So it's either controlled opposition, using fear as a tool, or divide. And also, the biggest of all, control our time. So, anyhow, so I've said enough about the people doing it, but they're all have their little acts in the game, right? So So they're yelling about the end of democracy and the return to a king like it matters, right? And that was his whole march that the elite scheduled, no kings. Well, I think they're playing the public for a bunch of suckers because they themselves know that this is not real, right? Not all of them, but the ones at the top definitely know. And all of these attorneys, all these channels are run by attorneys and stuff, like those Midas touch people. They're all a bunch of attorneys, right? And they don't see that this country isn't even a real country and this isn't about democracy. Come on, this is all just a big game of outrage, right? So, in yesterday's show, I want to remind you, I was talking about that Army memo that I uncovered that outlines their plans for how they're going to be using nuclear on all of this. And I updated my website, and you'll find the show notes all there because I didn't talk about it, and I talked about it so endlessly. I guess I just forgot. Well, I also have dementia, so that could be part of it. But interestingly enough, now all of the testing, I've been talking for years about all the testing they did on us without our approval or consent. And remember, Bill Clinton came out and said, I'm here to apologize to you Americans. Some things were done to you that never should have been done. I swear it's never going to happen again. Yeah, that whole thing. So, yeah, I updated it and put that whole thing in there because, yes, they have, in fact, been testing on us for a very long time. And I'm sure it came out of that memo, right? Do the human tests, hide those, and do a couple rat tests, and then skip it from there, right? So it is about omission, right? And what this deal is about Silicon Valley and Palantir, and like our DNA information, it's all about our data, right? Silicon Valley has figured out how to monetize our data. Now, I'm not really sure how sharp a plan this is for the future, because the reason they want to monetize our data is mainly to sell us things, right? Like new insurance policies or a new way to drink coffee in the morning or some other deadly thing they want to lure us into doing, right? So I'm not sure that in the future, with people being kicked out of their homes and living in the streets and all this stuff, that our data has the same value that these people are claiming that it does, because, well, who's going to have money to buy those slick things they're showing on the ads, right? So anyhow, so yeah, so it's all about our data. And just like our DNA information, that is also run by private countries. Remember, we have Ancestry.com and 23andMe. Those two companies control all of our DNA information. Now, why isn't everybody else flipping their wigs over this deal? Well, I think it's a pretty huge deal, right? So we have all of our private DNA information and none of the characters on social media. I don't see anybody get too concerned about this, right? And especially the latest one, because when you signed that deal, if you bought into the 23andMe deal to track down your relatives, which interestingly enough, they really couldn't track down anybody past the 1800s. Gee, I wonder why that is. And the interesting thing is, they signed an agreement saying, oh, we're never going to use your information. Well, what just happened? Well, 23andMe declared bankruptcy. Whoops, there goes your information to the data brokers. So it's all about mining our data. And the big push about Palantir is they are trying to organize our data, is really all that this is about going on, right? They want to take all of our records and put them in certain places so the cops could easily find them and stuff like that. It's like almost like they're being a good administrator, right? Because Palantir Technologies operates primarily in the big data analytics business, AI, and government military intelligence software space. And the part about they're funded by the CIA and all of that, yeah, I'll be getting into all that later. But today I just want to show you how this whole thing, well, it doesn't make any sense, okay? Unless they're really talking 30 years down the road. So let's do a good old-fashioned business report on the general statistics. Back in my day when I was younger and I went to start a new business, I actually sat down and wrote up business plans. I looked at the competition and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So I did the same kind of thing to do with Palantir. And in this case, it's kind of interesting because I said yesterday I've been sharing my work with ChatGPT. So now ChatGPT has all my information. So when I go to do a program like today, it's fairly straightforward because I've already talked to ChatGPT about concerns about these things. So just keep in mind, it's primarily in the big data analytics, okay? And they get these contracts now from the government. So its major competitors vary by sector between government, commercial, defense, and healthcare. So what we did, I took a breakdown of who their different competition is, okay? These companies often compete for contracts with the U.S. Department of Defense, intelligence agency, and DHS, etc. Okay. Raytheon Technologies, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Leidos, SIAIC, General Dynamics IT, Booz Allen Hamilton, CACI International, Anduril Industries, L3 Harris Technologies. A lot of companies a lot of us have never heard about, right? But they are huge. They make Palantir look like a tiny, tiny company, okay? So in the commercial sector, Palantir faces competition from companies offering data lakes, predictive analytics, and enterprise AI platforms. There's a company called Snowflake. It's a cloud data platform with advanced analytics. There's a company called Databricks, unified platform from big data and AI. Sputnik, operational intelligence and real-time analytics. IBM, they have the Watson AI. I've talked about that in the past. They also do consulting and data services. There's SAS, advanced analytics, AI and statistical software. A company called Tableau. Salesforce, visualization and analytics. Alarix, data blending and advanced analytics. Oracle, data platforms, analytics, and government contracts. Microsoft, large enterprise data ecosystem. And we have Amazon Web Services, or AWS. That's services like SageMaker, Redshift, and AI tools. So who are some of the leading AI and machine learning platform competition? So keep in mind, we are right now at the first entry level stage. AI right now is like a glorified search engine. And we've had some of these tools for a very long time. For example, back in my day when I was young and my first job, we used these typewriters from IBM, and they were memory typewriters. And this would have been around 1970 something. And we actually had typewriters that you could program in sales letters and you could key in the names. So we could sit in the office there and crank out these mailings and stuff because we could program our typewriters. Okay. So we're not really light years away from where we've been all this time. Okay. So let's keep that into perspective. So then I did a list of the companies that offer tools and platforms for enterprises to develop their own AI models. Because in order for this to work, it has to be taught, okay? And they're already in a lot of trouble trying to teach because what's going on is this. In order for the next teachable stage of AI to work, people have to sit down in front of a computer screen and identify things. Like they'll show you a list of 10 different things. They say, which one of these is a pickle? Okay. And then they might say, which one of these is a penis? So they're also having to identify a lot of very disturbing content. Okay. Part of this thing. So they've already run into huge trouble with the workers in Africa and stuff. Already people are onto this stuff and they're having trouble getting the workers for it. Okay. So that is what the next stage is. And that whole thing, along with they have yet to, they haven't raised the money for these AI centers. They haven't built the buildings. They haven't dealt with the infrastructure. They haven't dealt with the electricity issues or the water or regulation. They haven't dealt with any of this stuff, right? So all of this stuff right now is just talk. So the companies most similar to Palantir's Foundry and what they call the AIP are these companies: Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, OpenAI, C3 AI. So these are all people who are their competition, who just by general sight are much larger than Palantir, right? But Palantir has focused on biotech and healthcare. So that's gotten them into the NIH, the NHS in the UK. And they have lots of competition there. They have a company called Ikiva, Flatron Health. I have them all listed down below. Tempus, Clarify Health, and Velify. So yeah, and that's a Google company. So they have some pretty big competition, right? So and some governments have local solutions that they're working on. So I have all those listed down below, like Germany, China, and the UK have different solutions they're working out for all this stuff. So anyway, so what has come about with Palantir, that there's a perception that it's kind of a shadowy power broker. Palantir has a mystique. It was co-founded by Peter Thiel and has ties to the CIA via the Intel Q program. And that is a CIA private funding group. And I'll have much more about that down the road. But Palantir also works with the military, intelligence, and law enforcement, including projects which are kind of hot button right now, which is ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're also involved with the Pentagon and the UK's NHS. So these are high stakes, high surveillance operations. So these, I think they're raising a lot of fear about dystopian total data control futures, right? But basically, what Palantir is doing is going around and organizing their data, right? They're not developing it, they're organizing it. Okay, so keep that in mind. So Palantir has software called Gotham, Foundry, and Apollo. They specialize in aggregating, analyzing, and visualizing massive data sets. It's used for tracking criminals and terrorists, military targeting, and predictive policing. So these things would naturally bring up fears of mass surveillance and loss of privacy, right? Because they always layer the AI into these tools to act like, well, because of AI, we're going to be able to see your every move and keep things straight and simple. The internet does not operate from those satellites they show us pictures of, those CGI pictures over on NASA. Those are, in fact, graphics created by NASA. The internet is run under the ocean like it has since the 1800s. So I mean, the layer of lies is pretty deep here, right? So yeah, so this whole thing of they can look down from the sky and spy on us because look, they've got those satellites up there that's beaming us the internet. Well, that's not true. Those satellites are not beaming us the internet. The internet is coming to us under the ocean. So you see how this whole thing starts to fall to pieces once you use a little bit of critical thinking. So yeah, so if you think that it's coming from the satellites in the sky, you probably would be more likely to believe some of this stuff, right? So so Palantir is it brings up a lot of fear because they believe that all, and there's been a couple of cases where there was a murder that happened and Google coordinated with the local cops. I think it was in Florida, and Google coordinated with the cops and they gave them the information from whose phones were registered during that time, so they could hopefully look for somebody who was a murderer roaming the neighborhood. Well, that ended up in the biggest pile of garbage you ever want to run into because they just couldn't do it because it's not there. They can't pinpoint us the way that they say they can. As a matter of fact, I did a show about this during the JonBenet Ramsey murder trial. I was very involved. That was the first big murder case on the internet, and I was very involved in that case. Of course, I didn't know at the time that it was a psyops, but hey, so at that time, they were trying to figure out who I was because I had broken into John Ramsey's computer. And these people were so stupid, they had actually a team of people to try to track down where I lived. And I played all kinds of tricks on them. I figured out how IP numbers worked at that point, and I went around to the library and sent out communication from different places that would show me tracking from different addresses. And back then, this was quite a bit of work on my part. But anyway, so I had them all tricked. And John Ramsey, this was a CIA operation. So they were running that operation out of a private server, which was very easy to crack into, I might say. But keep in mind, during the 90s, everybody was cracking into computers and stuff. Even yours truly. I sound so sweet, old now. Yeah, I cracked into their computer. And you would think, being a CIA operation, they could have nailed me that week, right? Oh, no, they couldn't. They went through weeks and weeks of hullabaloo to try to figure out where I was and who I was. And I had lived in the same house for years. It wasn't like I was some transient person. I never changed my name. So all of this stuff about how quickly they can track us down, I would, well, I wouldn't believe a lot of it because psychopaths, in my opinion, are pretty horrific when it comes to a lot of these details. Okay. So let's continue on because they're also this narrative that Palantir is portrayed as a authoritarian tool. There's been articles in The Intercept, Vice, Wired. They have called it Orwellian as a threat to civil liberties. And that's the funny part because we don't have any civil liberties, but everybody's taking the bait, right? So it's viewed as the intelligence back end that can connect all surveillance tools. So the big fear is one company, one platform, AI equals total control. And well, I got to tell you, I don't think it's looking very good for the total control part because I am here to tell you my opinion is that this is a cash grab. They can write up a lot of fear. They can keep their people busy online selling all kinds of fake things. And so, what is Palantir's unique position? Well, they're not a cloud platform like Amazon has or Google or Microsoft. It's not a consultant firm like some of these other companies are. It operates more like a brain, integrating and analyzing data across systems. That's why it feels like data overload to some observers because it understands and connects dots more than it stores or owns the data. That's very key, okay? So Palantir does not own the world's data, but it makes sense of it in high level, often classified ways. That's why it's feared more than competitors, not because of size, but because of strategic insight and proximity to power. Because Palantir is looking like Trump's company, right? So they're gaining that kind of power because of Trump and JD Vance, and JD Vance was endorsed by Peter Thiel, so they all connect, right? And keep in mind, one's misstep by Trump, and now you got JD Vance. So this picture could turn into a real horror show quickly, but nobody's looking at that. So anyway, so that's basically the reason why I think it has a fear on it because Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, they have much more control over actual infrastructure, but they don't market themselves the same way. And this is key because that's what I discovered that Palantir is marketing itself as the AI, okay? But what does Palantir know about AI that their competition doesn't know? Well, actually, nothing. It's just a hype word, right? So I think Palantir is exactly like Theranos and FTX. So supposedly Palantir does have actual customers. It does deliver to NATO, DoD, and the NHS. So it does have programs out there because it's supposedly been used in the Ukraine war, the COVID vaccine logistics, and intelligence ops. So they do have things that they're doing. So it's not like Theranos was just like, oh, we're going to prick a little bit of blood here and it's going to be revolutionary. No, it's not like that because they do actually have some things in the works. So, but I believe that it is another version of hype. So let's start off. 2003 to 2008, they had a secret start of the company. In 2003, founded by Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, K-A-R-P, pay attention to that name, Nathan Gettings, Joe Longsdale, and Stephen Cohen. So it's funded in part by IntelQ, the CIA's venture capital arm. So the purpose, of course, to prevent terrorism using data analytics. And they use the post 9/11 model. And then in 2005 to 2008, they built this thing called Gotham. It's a tool for linking intelligence data across agencies. So they did early deployments of classified and reportedly helped track terrorist cells. Well, they say, okay, basically, they took a bunch of data that these agencies had and started to put them into things that they could work with them easier, right? So, so Palantir calls itself the software that caught bin Laden. So, and even that's been disputed. So they're making war claims about catching bin Laden. Well, that was a false flag to begin with, right? So 2009 to 2013, Palantir expanded into law enforcement in the private sector. So in 2009, they began working with places like the LAPD, really great group of gangsters there, right? And the NYPD. 2010 to 2013, they quietly began work with ICE, CIA, NSA, and the FBI. And what they were doing was software was used for predictive policing and immigration tracking. So why are they even using Palantir? Because the government doesn't really have these records, just like you would think, right? You would think they would have all of our DNA information, right? Nah, it's a private company. So anyway, and in 2013, they started their commercial division called Palantir Boundary. So early criticism from civil rights groups over surveillance and profiling, growth in law enforcement showed real world adoption, claiming to revolutionize industries, but they've had few commercial wins yet. Okay. So 2014 to 2019, myth building and secrecy. The valuation of Palantir climbed to $20 billion without being profitable. This is a huge red flag. If you ever start to investigate Silicon Valley's companies on your own, this is what some of them will call the unicorn thing, but they're companies that they've convinced the public they should be funded, even though they're not profitable. Kind of like Amazon. Amazon wasn't profitable for many, many, many years because I think Amazon was there to collect all of our preference data, right? So yeah, Amazon's run by the government. Of course it is. So anyway, so the secrecy thing, they refused to go public during that time, 2014 to 2019, and they built the mystery like, what's Palantir doing? So it was used in military targeting, drone missions, and battlefield analysts. So we don't know how good any of this, right? And interestingly enough, they were alleged to help in tracking ISIS. Well, ISIS is really the USA government, right? So, and it says that the details are murky about how Palantir played a role in tracking ISIS. Well, so they want the hype to be their reputation as a super AI platform, yet little transparency or verification. Critics, like myself included, say tools are glorified dashboards, not actual artificial intelligence. So moving right along, 2020, they do their initial public offering or IPO, and they go public on the New York Stock Exchange. You see, I don't know. In 2020. Okay, so okay, 2021 to 23 was the AI boom, geopolitical conflict. We had the Ukraine wars. Yeah, we had all these wars going on. So all people heard was, oh, Palantir's over there with their software. So yeah, it really created a lot of buzz around the company, right? So 2024 to 2025, they consider the time of the AI arms race. And during that time, Palantir rebrands its offering around artificial general intelligence or AGI. Palantir also partners with militaries and health systems on AI control panels. Critics say it's militarizing AI faster than regulations can catch up. So, Palantir is positioning themselves as a central nervous system of the West. And ethical alarms have been raised because no open review, no democratic oversight, massive scope creep. So, yeah, I have a whole list of things about the hype that they've used, and they're not they're not making money. This is all like a big sales tool, right, to get everybody afraid. So, and they're selling this whole thing as they're the ones with the AI. So I was really trying to dig into, well, if they're the ones with the real AI and nobody else seems to have it, what is the trick, right? Well, come to find out, it is a big trick. They're not doing anything different than anybody else. They're just using that as part of their tag word. They're just saying, Palantir, we're the leaders in AI. So, and what they do is, Palantir heavily markets its AI as teachable, which is not true. It would be if they're going to put teams of people into these data centers and stuff, but no. They say that the AI then learns the logic of a company. No, it just is the chat GPT stuff. They just remember what you put in there, kind of like they remembered back when I was a kid working at that place and we had those memory typewriters, IBM, right? It just remembered that was a sales letter that we sent out. The letter knew to prompt you to type in somebody's name. You could feed in these names and stuff. So, yeah, really, we haven't advanced much past that old uh, typewriter. So, anyhow, so what they do is they just keep things very, very vague, okay? And they make it sound futuristic and dangerous. What they emphasize is tactical autonomy. The idea that a commander, analyst, or CEO can train an AI assistant to think like them and execute plans. Critics worry this move toward relegating life and death decisions to machines, especially in warfare or policing. Palantir claims this is safer because the system is explainable and auditable, unlike black box consumer AI. Well, it's all just fluff and puff, right? So what they're saying is this. They're selling the future, right? They say everyone else is building AI to chat. We're building AI to act. So this is a thing from their marketing group, right? They're selling a future facing trainable decision making AI, especially to governments and militaries, as a leap beyond language models. So, Palantir's pitch is clever and strategic, but it hinges on this key sleight of hand. It says, we own the future because we've defined what the future should look like. They're not just selling tech, they're selling a narrative that the real future of AI isn't chatbots. It's AI you can trust in war, crisis, and command. That future doesn't fully exist yet, but when it does, they'll already be embedded in it. So let's talk about the investment. Infrastructure limits. Their AI platforms depend on real-time data access across defense systems, hospitals, and factories. This means clients need to build or overhaul their secure cloud systems. They need to create private data lakes. They need edge computing in drones, tanks, and satellites. Most of that doesn't exist at scale yet. It's aspirational, meaning it's a feeling, a theory, a cloud, right? Palantir says, we'll help you build it. Reality checks, most organizations aren't even remotely ready. Palantir's say the people power, not plug and play. Palantir's tech requires elite analytics, engineers, and trained teams to operate it. It's not intuitive software like ChatGPT. It's mission grade and complex. Governments and corporations would need to staff thousands of highly trained personnel to use this effectively. There's a huge cost, long timelines, potential for misuse or failure without top-tier oversight. What they do is cost of control. Their model locks customers into Palantir as their platform of record. Once embedded in military systems, nuclear logistics, energy grids, or food supply chains, replacing Palantir becomes nearly impossible. That adds enormous value, but also enormous risk and centralization of power. They have a sales strategy in just this one line, and here it is. We built the interface to a future world. You just need to rebuild your entire organization to use it. It's a brilliant move. If you believe in their future, you have to invest now. If you don't buy in, you risk being left behind. And either way, they stay on the scent. Palantir's AI, as they describe it, does not fully exist yet. What they're offering is a framework for building that AI if you pour in the human time, infrastructure, and strategic alignment. So what does Palantir have right now? They have powerful platforms like Gotham, Foundry, and AIP that integrate, visualize, and analyze massive data sets. They have a system where humans can start to teach workflows to AI agents. They have early tools for tactical decision assistance, pattern recognition, human AI teaming in defense, health, and industry. What they don't have is this, a fully autonomous AI that can learn a new military company or crisis scenario and act like a trained operator. They do not have a general purpose teachable AI that works across sectors without immense onboarding. They do not have an AI that can truly adapt on its own with little to no human help. Bottom line, they're promising a potential, not product. Their AIP is proto AI command center, not the AI brain itself. So they need the AIP. They have to have human trained AI agents, and they're still in the training phases. They have to have human experts, analysts, continuous feedback loop. They have to have infrastructure, networks, data lakes, energy edge sensors. They have to have raw operational data like surveillance, logistics, and finance. They haven't done any of those things, right? They're right now starting to raise the money, but no buildings have been built or anything, right? So what their sales play is this: we built the architecture. You need to supply the power, people, and time to make it real. Yeah, that's exactly true, right? It's almost like Tesla in 2008. Tesla said electric cars are the future. Tesla said, here's a prototype. Now let's build the grid, the factories, the charging network, the batteries, and AI, and train the population to use them. They started saying that in 2008. Well, they're producing cars that blow up on site. They're very dangerous to drive, and now they're going to be importing a bunch of the same kind of cars from China. So, yeah, it took them from 2008 to now to see that these cars are actually all just blowing up pieces of garbage, right? So Palantir also points ChatGPT as proof that AI works, but their actual AI system, the kind they're selling, does not exist yet. It can't exist until there's massive investment in human training and staffing, security infrastructure, real-time structured data streams, long-term deployment environment on military, energy, and health. So here's some of I've had them look up some of the sayings. What they're saying is, the age of AI is here. Look at ChatGPT. Now imagine that power in your battlefield or hospital. We built the AI platform of the future. Our AI learns from you. We built a shell where a future AI might work if you do all the hard parts. You will spend years feeding it human labeled input, training, validation, and constant oversight. Another saying, this is operational AI. What that really means is we've made very powerful dashboards and interfaces. The AI part is still human reliant. It's not plug and play AGI. It's people intensive, fragile, and unproven at scale. So Palantir uses ChatGPT and other large models to legitimize the AI boom. Look, it's real. AI is here. It's changing everything. They make governments afraid of falling behind adversaries. Suggest that their military version of AI will be just as magical, only more powerful and secure. But again, ChatGPT is a pre-trained, general purpose, and consumer friendly. Palantir's vision is custom trained, mission specific, and requires armies of experts and infrastructure. So, this is a really great line. We're the railroad company for the AI gold rush strategy, but the trains haven't run yet, and the tracks don't go anywhere unless you lay them yourself. I'll repeat that. We're the railroad company for the AI gold rush strategy, but the trains haven't run yet, and the tracks don't go anywhere unless you lay them yourself. So yeah, it is basically they say that our AI learns from you. Well, that's also heavily reliant on human analysts for training and workflow adjustments. No autonomous learning at scale. So I've got a whole list of things that you take a look at down there, but this is really, they've come up with a sales slogan that beats out the competition, which they have a lot of companies that are much bigger than them. So, uh, so the one they say, we have AI that can operate in battlefield, supply chains, and health domains. And the reality is Palantir provides powerful dashboards and data analyst tools. AI decision making remains human guided and limited. So yeah, it's all fluff and duff. And let's talk about this dome. They have that dome over in Israel, right, that supposedly stops the missiles from coming in. But I'm pretty sure the U.S. taxpayers paid for it. But anyway, so it's called the Golden Dome that they're proposing here. And they proposed a $175 billion missile defense initiative championed by former President Donald Trump. So where the suspicion is the crowd on social media is thinking that Donald Trump is saying that this dome is to protect us from missiles like it does over in Israel. But what they're saying is, well, this is a trick because pretty soon it's going to be just like the Matrix. Watch, overhead, they're going to see everything you're doing. Well, okay, so I think he did it his last term, he proposed this Golden Dome, of course. This ambitious plan aims to create a space-based shield to defend against advanced missile threats from nations like Russia and China. It includes global sensors, space-based interceptors like lasers, and advanced AI analytics. Trump's call for non-traditional contractors has opened the door for tech startups and major players such as Microsoft, SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril to compete for Pentagon contracts totaling $151 billion over 10 years. So Palantir, founded by Peter Thiel, has longstanding ties to the U.S. government. So anyway, so this Golden Dome, I'll get into more of the other Peter Thiel stuff later, but so Palantir's involvement in the Golden Dome initiative has raised concerns amongst privacy advocates and civil liberty groups. The company's role in implementing this vision, keep in mind a vision, right, places it at the heart of a controversial push toward greater surveillance and government oversight. Critics worry about the potential misuse of data and lack of transparency, while supporters argue it could enhance national security and governmental responsiveness. And this all goes along with the thinking that, I don't know, I guess the people that believe this stuff are extremely paranoid people, right? Or maybe on too many drugs, if you ask me, because this kind of crippling paranoid thinking that they all exhibit, right? We gotta watch out, they're coming to get us. Who exactly has ever tried to get the United States? I mean, really, just think about it, right? So all this pushing as far as thing, but let's talk about reality. These things require huge energy demands, power plants, or upgraded grid capacity, especially with the current U.S. grid being somewhat fragile and outdated in parts. So physical infrastructure, satellites, sensors, data centers, fiber optics, and secure communication networks. They also need skilled workforce, engineers, data scientists, security specialists, technicians, plus a large ongoing maintenance and operations crew. There's complex coordination between government agencies, private contractors, local state authorities, and regulatory bodies. There's extensive funding to be involved, billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars that have to be justified politically and economically. Even if the political will exists, getting all of these moving parts in place, securing funds, and overcoming technical challenges could take years or even decades. Plus, major infrastructure projects often face delays, budget overruns, and political pushback. So while the vision of such a dome might be floated or used rhetorically now, realistically, it's a long-term, extremely complex build-out that's still far from actual deployment. This also means there's time for public scrutiny, debate, and possible pushback. Now, instead of doing that, people are just focused on, oh my God, they've got us. We're in the corner now. So let's talk realistically. Huge energy demands. What are we lacking all over the world? Energy, right? So there's huge energy demands already. Power plants or upgraded grid capacity, especially with the current U.S. grid being fragile. Physical infrastructure. They need satellites, sensors. They need to build the data centers. They have to have the fiber optics. So, and all the workers are going to need. Where are they getting all these people from, right? And they need billions and billions of dollars. So the U.S. Power structure, our power grid is pretty much a wreck, right? So typical timeline would be 5 to 15 years for major new power plants or grid modernization projects. So just to get started, after they write the plan, after they raise the money, it would take them 5 to 15 years if they started that today for major new power plants or grid projects. So that's let's say let's just call it 20 years, okay, just to get this first part done. And that doesn't even involve all the people and all the stuff, right? Then they have challenges designing and building new satellites, the sensors, the radars, or ground stations. Launching and deploying space-based systems. Satellites take years to build and test. They have to coordinate with existing military and civilian space assets. They have to develop resilience and secure communication links. And that process could typically take 5 to 10 years for satellite constellations or sensor network. And they haven't really solved the problem. The satellites they're talking about are not up in the sky, okay? So they're talking about satellites in the sky. So this is assuming that they need to put up satellites that they don't have now, right? Because the satellites you see on that NASA website are 100% CGI. So not only do they have to do all of the stuff I just mentioned, they have to then they have to build satellites, right? Because they really don't have any. Show me the satellites. They're none in existence. So this next little step could take 5 to 10 years for satellite constellations or sensory network. Now let's get to the data centers and communication infrastructure. Well, they need to build secure, large-scale data centers capable of storing and processing enormous amounts of data. They need to work on expanding fiber optics networks and secure communication lines nationwide. Cybersecurity, hardening, and physical security for sensitive facilities. They need compliance with data privacy and government regulations. And that timeline for that part would be, I don't know, about 3 to 7 years, just to large data center campuses and nationwide network buildouts. Okay, so what do we got? 20, 30, we're down to about 40 years now, right? I'm just kind of keeping track in my head because it's all so ridiculous, right? So next we have the software. They need software for the AI and data integration, right? They got to develop the software. Well, they need to develop advanced AI systems for real-time data analysis and threat detection. They need integration over multiple data sources across agencies and private sector partners. They need to organize all that stuff. They need to do testing, debugging, and interactive improvement cycles. They need ethical and legal oversight mechanisms. And that timeline, like take between 5 and 10 years of continuous development and refinement. And in case you're wondering, how do I know all this stuff? Well, I worked in Silicon Valley. I was there working at Intel before I started my consulting business, and I was there when they were developing the Ethernet, the signals they were running the internet with. And that took every major company to coordinate all that stuff. So yeah, I do have a little bit of a background in some of this stuff. And what I'm showing you is a mild example, okay? These deadlines, if all of these things, if this last one might take 5 to 10 years of continuous development and refinement, well, they could easily go to 20 years, okay? If you've ever worked around engineering people, you will see it is an entirely different kind of thing to deal with, okay? Because when I worked in marketing, my role was to go and meet with the engineers, understand what they were doing, and be able to communicate it to the public so they would hopefully buy it. So it took a lot of understanding of what the technology was. I can't sit down and design chips and stuff, but I can certainly probably the best troubleshooter you'll ever find in the industry. So yeah, so I had to understand what the technology was and then listen to them blather on and on and on and on about what they thought it was going to be and what they thought it was going to do, and then narrow it all down. So yeah, because you can't print all that stuff into a brochure. You have to absorb the information and transform it. So yeah, so what are the challenges in that? Well, they got to secure billions in government funding and possibly private investments. They need to navigate complex interagency, state, and local government cooperations. They need to manage public relations and addressing privacy concerns. I'm sure they'll do great at that. They need to have legal, regulatory, and congressional oversight. Yeah, probably not a problem because we now are back to the King deal, right? So just a typical timeline for that was 3 to 5 years to plan, approve, and secure funding and ongoing coordination thereafter. So the overall time estimate, it could, well, 20 years would be a very gracious time frame. I think this thing would zip so far out of control. I would double the 20 years, and I would feel comfortable putting my neck on the line and telling my boss, no, this project is going to take 40 years, not 20 years. So many projects proceed in phases or layers, gradually expanding capabilities rather than all at once. Unexpected delays or technological breakthroughs can shorten or extend timelines. Public pushback or legal challenges can slow or halt progress. Existing military or infrastructure may provide partial groundwork, but scaling to full national coverage is a massive step. So yeah, it is I'm not trying to be like really negative. I mean, maybe this stuff would be a great idea, right? If you like to be controlled and managed by a bunch of psychopaths. But so yeah, big tech companies like Palantir, SpaceX, Microsoft, and others all compete to position themselves as key players in these massive defense and data projects. And let's not forget, where did Palantir come out of? And I'll be getting back to that later. They came out of Stanford. Who else came out of Stanford? Well, Theranos, and FTX. I couldn't find any other universities that had the same kind of grift or scam that Stanford is running. And keep in mind, Stanford University, I talked about this years ago, the founder of Stanford University was founded on the basis of eugenics. So in conclusion, all of this stuff, all of this stuff that they're talking about now, well, I think it is nothing more than a pipe dream, okay? They want to collect more data. And frankly, if you're so worried about data, get rid of those apps on your phones you're all using. Those apps are the free things they're giving you to track you. If you're getting tracked anywhere, it's likely going to be from all of those handy free apps you've installed on your own. Remember, They want to ensnare you however they can. And I'll have much more about Palantir down the road, but I hope this has helped your thinking. And on my website, I have this all laid out. So if you didn't understand what I was saying, you could go and read it for yourself. This is the plan. They plan to do all of this surveillance and stuff, right, in the future. But the future can't come any sooner than the next 20 or 30 years, if you ask me. Now, maybe I have just blown this whole thing out of proportion. Maybe they could zip through these steps faster than anything, but I'm here to say not likely. They started with the training of the people over in Africa. Now people are wise to them. Nobody wants to do this work for these people because it is disgusting and filthy work, and they only want to pay people a couple dollars an hour in those countries to do it. So if you want to keep your head straight on straight, get rid of all the apps that start to disconnect yourself from Silicon Valley. I never kept up with the technology after I left Silicon Valley. I would be happier using my old flip phone. My phone is not connected to the internet. You need to pay attention if you're going out and doing things. Do not take your phone. It can be used 100% as evidence. There's new laws being passed that cops can force your finger or your face to your phone to unlock it. So if you're going to go with your phone, which I think is a horrible idea, at least have it password protected because they can't get into your phone now if it's password protected. But the other ways they can get in. But trust me, if they want you in handcuffs, they'll get you in handcuffs. I have spent a night in a local county jail here in the United States over something that never should have happened. I spent 2 nights in a mental ward. I understand what it's like being locked up in this country, and I really don't want it to happen to you. So be safe out there and goodbye for now.